I was born in '44, so that was at the end of the war, roughly, in Mobile, Alabama. Although I'm fifth generation in Gadsden County, I think most of my ancestors are buried either in the Sunnydale Cemetery in Gretna or the old Mount Pleasant Cemetery up the road, up 90 there. But we were displaced by the war. But my dad could not qualify to go in the military because his eyes were so bad that if he didn't wear glasses all the time, it actually made him sick. And so they called him to Camp Blanding, Florida, and checked him 3 different times, and he just couldn't do it. But he was a strong man and a hard worker, so he went to the shipyards in Mobile, and his knowledge and background was farming, and this is farming on a very small scale, and carpentry, which his daddy was involved in. And so in shipbuilding, I didn't realize it, but there are a lot of wooden forms that are built, so they pour concrete in there for walls and other types of structure. And so that's what they did. Daddy said it was probably the hottest job in the world because you're down in the hold of a ship with the sun shining on you, you can get no wind, and back then they didn't have fans or anything keeping them comfortable. So he said it was very difficult. But as soon as the war was over, we moved back to Gretna, which was the home base of the Thompsons. Then we were fairly close to where my mother grew up, which was Hardaway, which is about 10 miles west of Gretna. But anyway, the toter's responsibility was to not let that pad get too high with the primer. And the reason is his hands would bruise that bottom leaf or two. And a cigar wrapper is all you made out of those leaves, and if it was bruised, it was a lower grade. So now some people had a little piece of wood that they could use for the toters and or the primer. But anyway, the toter took that pad and ran to the end of the row and gave it to the barge packer, which was usually a pretty mature farm worker who laid it out very carefully and so as not to tear or bruise, and laid it in a way that when you took it up, you wouldn't tear it or bruise it. So 15 cents an hour, and we worked 10-hour days. That'd be $1.50 a day. That's right. That's $7.50. See, I got a pretty good memory on that. $7.50 a week.
Did you get to
for
keep that? Or?
10 hours a day. You started at 7. You got 1 hour for lunch, and you quit at 6.
Did you get to keep that money, James Harold, or did that?
Yeah. Well, you know, different kids, different things. But the way my parents handled that, they would, actually at that young, they probably managed it all, but by the time I remember what I did with it, I would really save toward buying a specific kind of jean, dungaree or something. Like my parents, if I left it to them, they would buy me Sears Roebuck jeans. Well, the style was Levi's, but Sears Roebuck were cheaper. So I would save my money and buy the Levi's because I wanted to be proud when I went to school, you know. But saved a good bit of it, and then and personally what I did with some of mine, I still have cattle today, but I bought an old Jersey milk cow, and can't remember what her name was, but she had a calf pretty quick on George Washington's birthday, and we named the calf George Ann. It was a heifer. And we kept those cows till I was about grown, you know. If you're a taller boy, lankier boy, you can take 3 lanky boys and hang the top tiers in a barn with just 3 people. If all the boys are not pretty tall and lanky, it takes 4. So that's extra labor. So I grew off pretty tall pretty quick, so the time I was 15, you know, I was up there. And the trick up there, when you go up in the barn, you don't really want to be under anybody. There's several reasons for that. One is somebody falls out above you, you're gonna get hurt. But the other one is, it's those tiers, those rafters, or we call them tiers. When you scrape along them, all that dust and dirt and grime comes off on you, and especially in your eyes. And when you hand the tobacco up, you know, it's this guy hands to me, then I hand to the guy up there. All that goes in your eyes. So, boy, I started working on that as soon as I got about 6 feet tall, to let my uncle I worked for by then let me be the top man. But the top man has to hang the tobacco. And hanging the tobacco is very important. You've got to space it just right. If it's too close, it will, the leaves will overlap and it'll cause them to kind of green rot. If it's too far apart, you don't get much tobacco in that barn, you know, and they got it all figured out. So many acres goes in each barn, and you can't have excess. You might have a little less, but you can't have excess. When I started, they built the fires in the barn to dry the tobacco. And they wanted to dry the tobacco, the shade tobacco, very gradually to make a mellow tan leaf. You can fire cure it like we did Cuban tobacco later on, and it makes a green leaf, but it's cured. But anyway, they wanted a good mellow looking mild leaf on the cigars that we were producing the tobacco for. And so when I started, they had wooden fires. They dug pits in the barn all the way through it, maybe 8-10 feet apart. And they built little fires in there. Well, a lot of barns burned from sparks, because the tobacco seed would dry. It would dry out, and then you'd open the windows and the humidity would come in. Open the windows at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, let the humidity in. So what you were doing is bringing in and out the humidity, and that was part of the curing process, and we called it bringing it in case when it was when we brought the humidity in, so you could handle it then, see, without it shattered. When it was dry, it shattered. But the hardest job I ever did in my whole life was I got a job. One of my uncles managed a construction company warehouse in Quincy. The name of it was Williams Construction, but he managed the supply part of it. And I went to him because I had 2 weeks, and I said, "Uncle Tom, do you have anything I can do?" He said, "The only thing I can think of." He said, "I know I can pay you for this." He said, "We've got a box car full of bricks out here, and it was on the rail, you know, and we need them stacked over here by this pallet." And he said, "Do you want to do that?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I sure do." Now, in that boxcar, it was probably 100 degrees, you know, but tobacco had really prepared me for the hard work, and it wasn't all that bad once you get your rhythm going, and I was in shape to do it, you know. My senior year of college, I got a job with the Havitampa subsidiary, Joe Wells Incorporated in Quincy. They worked a lot of the boys, a lot of the athletes, football players, basketball players, and I just never had worked there. I'd been stuck on the farm kind of, and the transportation was an important aspect of my family. We had one automobile for 6 people, so everybody didn't have to go a different way every day, you know. And on the farms, they'd kind of pick you up, you know. They had trucks that come out and pick all of us up. But anyway, I got that job in the packing house, and of course I was nearly a college graduate, so I wasn't a kid. They made me what they call the scale man. Earlier, they put it all down in bulk. We hear it called books of tobacco. Well, it was bulks, what it was. And those bulks, they had a certain way, and some of those men were artists, really, the way they stacked that tobacco, and they had to do it just right so the stems wouldn't rot. And when you packed it that way, in those big bulks, about halfway up, you'd put a pipe, and then you'd have a pipe thermometer that went up in it. And when that tobacco, what it was doing was fermenting, kind of. And when it got a certain temperature, and I don't remember what it was, but that was part of my job in law school, was to check all the books and record the temperature and let them know which books to, what do they call that, transfer something the next day. But they had to unbulk it and bulk it back, air it out, and then bulk it back. That's why it took so much labor to do all that stuff. But anyway, they had to know where to put that pipe and when to put it there, and then we checked their thermometers. And but then back on the sweat room, that was a more modern way to deal with it. You put it in the smaller boxes, and they still did the bulks with some of the tobacco, the lower end of the tobacco, the tops, and maybe sand leaves and tops. But the good stuff was put in the sweat rooms. And the sweat rooms were about 110 to 120 degrees, and they had, we called them racks, but they were shelves, and up pretty high, about as high as somebody my height could reach, which is why I ended up having to do a lot of that, go in there. And but you'd have two guys. I mean, it was 110 pounds, and to put it up over your head like that constantly, you'd take a couple of guys in that height range to do it. But what we did there, and of course, this was way back in the back of those packing houses. We just automatically all wore boxer shorts under our breeches, because we coming out of everything that we could, and everything you had on would get wet. So, and you had to gradually come back up front. And the front of the packing house was probably 90 degrees, but you had to gradually do that because it would freeze to death. You'd feel like you're freezing, and you'd get a cold and all. But later on in life, when I was running for office, I had a guy from Panama City that was a big political operative. And he had worked for Eli Witt Company, which was owned by Tampa. And Eli Witt Company was one of the ones, they would go in the small stores, especially small grocery stores, and they put all the sundry items, which included tobacco seeds. So that's how Tampa got into to that business. But anyway, that guy told me, he said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "I can't remember you." Right off, he said, "I met you when you were about 20 years old or something like that, 21. He said, you were in the back of the Tampa packing house with nothing on but boxer shorts, and you were about as wet as if you'd just been swimming." So he knew my background, but he was always so supportive. It was good to run up on somebody like that. But anyway, the tobacco packing house, and I worked there. The new law school started in '66 at Florida State, and I figured it was the only one they were looking for students, and I was the only one I could get into, So I went there and I worked my way through by doing that. And the guy, Denny Hutchinson, that was the manager, also helped me get overtime sometimes, because what happened is a group of kids broke into a tobacco packing house. I think it was in Quincy. And they had treated that packing house with methyl bromide, which is deadly to insects and humans. And so they broke in to rob the Coca-Cola machine corn box. And I think those kids, a couple of them died, maybe out of 3, and it was just horrible. So whether it was a city or county ordinance or just something that everybody did, but they started having night watchmen, you'd watch it all weekend. You'd have to watch that packing house all weekend. So Denny would always give me that assignment, and I'd make some good money, extra money that way. It had to be done, and I did well on that. So the shade tobacco was a big part of my growing up and even my education. Oh, you better believe it. Now remember, I probably had, I always tell people I know I had over 40 first cousins, because I had 14 aunts and uncles, So, and we don't always know how many first cousins we have either. 'Cause I had one uncle who was kind of a sport, but I had a lot of first cousins and big families, and we worked on the farm in the summer, and a lot of those cousins were around. Tobacco harvesting was a big time family affair, community affairs. It's where blacks and whites and everybody, all age groups, we all got together. We knew each other through that interaction there. And so you learn how to work with people pretty quickly the fade out, kind of. And of course, I just had 2 siblings, but the whole time I grew up until after I graduated from law school, my grandfather lived with us, and so that was an additional person. So we had 6 people in the household, and then my other grandparents lived 6-7 miles away in the Hardaway community, and we were in and out over there. And then the other thing is working with people. Even though you're not in a supervisory capacity, you learn to lead by doing. When I was my uncle that I worked for as a primer, picking it off, y'all know what I describe. He expected me to lead the field. Part of it was I was named for him. His name was James Rudolph Presnell. But part of it is just that was what was expected of me. I was kind of supposed to be a leader, and that's what he expected of me. And I responded to it. I guess that was probably part of it too. Maybe I wouldn't have, but he would always, when I'd get out of my row, that was a big thing. See, if you were a good, fast primer, you might beat the other primers out of their row. Then what you want to do, you want to rest, lollygag around. He would say, Jamie, go there and then back again, son. Help the rest of them out. So I know, okay, so I'd get back. But that was good for me. And that's another real good entree into politics for rural communities like we had back then. I don't know how that's changed, and the ads and all these kind of things make such a difference. But back then, people knew your people. If they figured out who your people were, it's kind of like figuring out whether you could date a girl, whether she was kidding to you or not. But I know that my mother and daddy, they went all over the county, and they weren't political. See, that was a big help. They were just, my dad was a carpenter. He went to the 10th grade. My mother said she went to the 8th grade, I think. And but they had communities of interest of people of all races, of all walks of life that they had worked with through the years. People worked. They grew up during the Depression. Right. And so I know my mother, have y'all ever heard of the boarding house in Quincy where a lot of the young women, my mother was, lived there, right? Well, I don't know. I know the girls from the farms, by the time they got about 16, see, they'd quit school by then. And their parents would take them in there on like Sunday night, and they would roll cigars for Bud Cigar Company till Friday, and their parents would come get them. And I think that, I don't know whether that was year round but it was a year or two. But there was a group of those women that had grown up in that, and they were close knit. And when I started to run for office, my mother, all she had to do was make a phone call, and I had the whole family, because they were really close to each. They probably worked 10 hours a day, went there and ate something and collapsed, and so it really made them good sisters. But at the same time, it takes a certain amount of discipline, self-discipline, to really have a good democracy. And that's what I think, what we're slipping on. I think we're losing our self-discipline, and I think you're exactly right. The things that we did as we were growing up, working together, working and having to do it. I tell you what, I got a grandboy right now, and he's taking care of my horses and dogs. And he's just learned, he's 14 years old. By the time I was 14 years, I said when I was 14 years old, I was picking up eggs from 1,000 laying hens every day and feeding them. And the same people had to do it every day, otherwise it throws their production off. I always try to do is, just because I thought a certain way and somebody else was emphatically opposite, I felt I should listen to them and hear them out. And you think about it, all of us have changed our philosophy or our thinking about certain issues or whatever, you know. So to me, a true liberal is somebody that's always open, always open. But I'm afraid now we don't have many true liberals, and maybe we don't have many true conservatives either, you know, because I think everybody ought to listen to the other person's point of view and be open to new ideas. Technology itself creates the need for new ideas. Just think about how different everything is now than it was 10 years ago, than 20 years ago. So it's not reasonable to think that all that's going to change, and human nature doesn't change, but human knowledge, human philosophy and all those things got to change too. We're always in a constant state of evolving mentally and socially, I think.